Hello everybody, and this is yet another 2014 album review. And for this one, I am going to be reviewing an album that came out way early in the year, probably around, I would probably say February. I'm going to go as far as to saying it was in the month of February, if I can remember. And indeed, February, and came out on Valentine's Day. Of all days. Yeah, it came out on Valentine's Day, and this album, as you see on the title below, this is the review of the new Cynic album, Kindly Bent to Free Us. Now, this is the first Cynic full-length album that they've put out in 6 years since they put out their last album, which actually I forget what the bloody fuck it's called. What the hell was that album? Traced in Air. Yeah, that was their last full-length album. I mean, after that album, they released a couple EPs like Retraced and Carbon-Based Anatomy. But for those who don't know who Cynic are, Cynic is a band from Florida that started off as a mixture of punk, hardcore, and thrash, to the point where they started out as a crossover band in the beginning, but then they ran with death metal and prog rock and jazz fusion, and they put all those elements together to be one of the progenitors and the pioneers of the progressive / technical / jazzy death metal style that came from this band, as well as other bands like Atheist and even Death later on in their career. Same with bands like Pestilence and other bands along those lines. But Cynic, they put out their first album back in '93 called Focus, which was a standard technical death metal / progressive metal album, which is one of the all-time best debut albums in heavy metal history. And at the time, it was considered the one-album wonder, and if Cynic would have stopped making albums when Focus came out, that would have been a great one to end it off of, because that was a classic, legendary album in the prog death metal genre. But then they resurfaced, and then 15 years after, they put out Traced in Air, which was a more alternative rock approach to their prog metal style. But with this album, Kindly Bent to Free Us, this album really takes on more old prog rock, kind of in a similar vein to what Opeth did on their new album Pale Communion. But this album is a little bit heavier, I think, than the Opeth album by a tiny bit. But at the same time, this album definitely takes a lot more elements of alternative rock, mixing it in with jazz fusion and prog rock with a little bit of metal, and you put it all together, and out came this album. So anyways, let's get into the review. So the opening track, True Hallucination Speak, I thought it was a good song. I thought it was a nice way to get the album cycle going. But the next two songs, The Lion's Roar and the title track, Kindly Bent to Free Us, were both really solid tracks. Like, I thought they were great tracks, especially Lion's Roar. I really enjoyed that track. Really, with that song, it was 4.5 minutes, one of the shorter songs on the album. It definitely was well structured, well played, and there you had it. Infinite Shapes was a solid track, and actually also the next two, Moonheart, Sunhead, and I'm probably going to destroy the title of this song, but Chitanjali. I know it's some mythological, but yeah, but those three songs were really good, but I'd say those were the three weaker tracks on the album for me personally. But then you get to the creme de la creme, the final two tracks, Holy Fallout, which was the longest song at 6.5 minutes, and Endlessly Bountiful, which was awesome. Those two songs I thought were the most progressive songs on the album, the most jazzy of the album, and they were just really, really beautiful songs. Paul Masvidal's voice has definitely evolved over the years, where in the beginning he had more of the hardcore vocal style, and then he went into the death metal vocal style, but then because he blew his voice doing it, he decided to do more robotic kind of vocal style, like on the album Focus, in which with that album, with Focus, Paul definitely did a lot of robotic vocal styles, and the keyboard player they had at the time, Tony Teagarden, did the death metal style vocal on that album. But now he's gone into a much more cleaner voice, and he gets the job done, even though he's not the best singer, but it gets the job done, don't get me wrong. And also, you have not only him, but you also have another original member of the band still with them on this album, Sean Reinert, the drummer. Definitely took on a lot of jazz and prog rock influence on his drum performance. I think that was really that, and another component I'm going to talk about next, and that's the bass by Sean Malone. Sean Malone is one of the all-time best bass players in all music, and for metal for certain. Plays the fretless bass and a Chapman stick on the album, which gives it a much more prominent bass tone to this release. But the rhythm section, the drums and the bass were the MVPs of this whole album. Those two instruments really, really were unbelievably well produced and well performed on this album. So with that being said, some of the key components, the guitar playing was really good by Paul. The vocals, at times it kind of sounded a little bit kind of meh, but it got the job done. But I really think if I was to have my way, I would hope for Cynic to go back to the prog death metal style, but of course I know that Paul, he can't do that, but they can probably get another vocalist, maybe bring back Tony Teagarden or something to do the death metal vocals for the sound that they should try. But still, this is a good album nonetheless. But also the musicianship was really was excellent on this album. Then again, all three of them, Paul, Reinert, and Malone, Masvidal, Reinert, and Malone, all three of them are excellent players. And yeah, there you go. So overall, the whole album, despite it was half songs that were great and half solid tracks, the flow of the album was great. Like, I wouldn't say it had as good of a flow as the Aborted album that came out earlier in the year, but it had a really solid flow to it that I really enjoyed. But overall, this was a solid release, though it's not album of the year, but it's a good album. I would give this album a good 8 out of 10. I think this was a solid album. And it definitely shows that they've got potential for another album if they decide to make another album, which I actually hope they do. And thank you guys for watching this review of Cynic's Kindly Bent to Free Us. The next album, I'm trying to find a sample of Accept's Blind Rage. If I can, I'll do that album next. If not, the next album that I'll probably end up doing will be the new Autopsy album, Tourniquets, Hacksaws, and Graves. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Rock on!